My graduates from my school being Forbes, bag drop.
Bag drop.
A mic drop, bag drop.
Bag drop. All right, guys, welcome back. EYL. This is an episode that I'm looking forward to. Me and Troy both looking forward to.
Yeah.
So, when I first got introduced to the gentleman, Troy Carter, it was on Clubhouse, and there was I was on there as a panelist. I got brought in. I think Wall Street Trapper brought me in. Somebody brought me in, and it was a conversation with a bunch of people. I think Meek Mill was in there.
That was a big night.
Swiss Beats was in there. Yeah.
I remember that night. Yeah.
And Troy was in there, and that was the first time I actually heard about Mr. Carter. And I forgot what the conversation was about, crypto, something like that. So I said a couple of words, but I was mainly just listening. And he really piqued my interest because he was talking about art, and we all know that Swiss is a heavy art investor. And but there's something that we haven't really covered before, so I was like interested in just learning about art. And from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's the one that actually got Swiss into art. Is that true? Mentored him into that?
No, actually, it's funny enough. Swiss actually put me onto art early, but before I started collecting. So I went to his house out when he was living in the Catskills. And he had this incredible collection. I didn't even know who anybody was as he named them off. But I started probably collecting a few years after that. So that was Swiss put me onto a lot of stuff.
Okay. What was he living in the Catskills for?
Yeah, I'm like, I thought you were gonna say like when he was living in Jersey.
That's all the way up. That's all the way up there.
I was in the city, and Swiss said to come out to see him. And I'm thinking it's going to be, just a short ride out. And I go all the way out to the Catskills to see him.
Shout out to Swiss. So then I started to do my research, and I realized that he's a true Renaissance man. So founder and CEO of Q&A, which is a tech and media company. But before that, founder and CEO of Atom Factory. So he managed Lady Gaga and John Legend.
Might have heard of them. Yeah, a few people you might have known.
Yeah. Then it was Spotify, head of global creative services, entertainment advisor for the Prince estate. That's big. And then he's an investor as well, an early investor into a couple of companies that you might have heard of: Uber, Lyft, Dropbox, Spotify, Warby Parker, Blavity, Gambit Media. Shout out to John Henry.
Yeah.
And FazeClan. That's crazy because I found out about FazeClan from my son.
All the gamers.
Shout out to Nasir. He's a huge gamer.
I found out about it from my sons too.
Okay. Yeah. So the FazeClan is serious, man. I think Bronny's part of the FazeClan now.
Yeah.
And then he's also a trustee on the Aspen Institute, LA County Museum of Art. He's an art collector. And then he had early start with Will Smith and Diddy. Well, get into the whole thing. So
wait, we left one out. He was named by the big boss herself, Oprah Winfrey, the Super Soul's 100 list of influencers and visionaries.
Yeah.
So congrats to that.
So when I was finding out about it, I'm like, yo, you gotta get him on the show. Earn Your Leisure is the biggest.
The big show.
So I'm like, we gotta get him on there. But I didn't really know if he had a social media. He's kind of a hard guy to track down. So shout out to the good folks at
Nicole, thank you.
Yeah, Nicole and Black Effect from connecting the dots on this. So this is going to be a fun conversation, educational conversation. So first and foremost, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
No, listen, I'm happy to be here, man. I'm loving what you guys are doing. So when they hit me last week, I'm definitely wanted to be supportive. This is great.
I appreciate it. So let's jump right into it. West Philadelphia, born and raised.
It's very fitting.
The playground.
If anybody fits that line, it is definitely you, Mr. Carter.
So you got an interesting life story, man. Let's start at the beginning. So you were signed to Will Smith's record label?
Yeah, when I was in ninth grade, me and my two best friends started a rap group, and it was this thing where one of the guys said, if we meet Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince, they're gonna give us a record deal. So we just, would go down to their studio constantly and just wait outside to try to meet them. And then one day we were able to. So and quickly found out how terrible we were.
But you didn't let that ruin the networking chance that you had, because you still started working with Jeff, right?
Yeah, you know what? Like, what I tell my sons and my daughter is like, you just never know what path life takes you on. So it's like sometimes you just got to go with the flow, and when things don't necessarily go your way, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going the wrong way. It's just not going the way that you planned on it going. And so, meeting Will and those guys, they took me under their wing, and I really was able to learn the business from Will and his manager, James Lassiter.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you stay in contact with James Lattiser, and that leads you to doing some party promotion.
Yeah, that was like my hustle in Philly. Like, so where I got lucky because a lot of the guys in the neighborhood sort of they protected me from having to do other stuff. So like guys who used to hustle, and you had stick up boys from my neighborhood, you had guys who hustled, you had people who did all kinds of things. I was able to do what I love, which was music, and just and I had people in my neighborhood. This was like the 1990s version of GoFundMe, was just people from the neighborhood give you some money to throw a party. So I started throwing parties. I brought Wu-Tang Clan to Philly for their first time, Jay-Z's first time, Foxy Brown, Kim, Biggie. So like all of those shows in like the mid 90s, it was me and my big brother Charlie Mack out of Philly that was doing a lot of those shows.
That's Charlie Mack. That name is legendary in Philly, and definitely in the music industry.
Yeah, so that was my hustle.
So then you transitioned to working with Diddy. How'd that come about?
I actually met Puff because Big was a no-show for one of my concerts. And it was actually my first big show, and I was throwing it on Penn's campus, University of Penn's campus, and Big was supposed to go on, and I got a call from his manager, who was Mark Pitts, and telling me that Big was shooting the video for Big Papa and couldn't make it down. And I got into an argument with Puff on the phone, cursing me out. I'm cursing him out. They still come down to Philly for the after party, and Puff was like a legend and hip and like, but not big at that time. He wasn't huge, but in terms of Black culture and entrepreneurship, if you were in the music business, you wanted to be Puff. And seeing him at that club that night, we all went out to an after party. He basically just commanded the room, and I asked him for an internship, and he said, get me that girl from behind the bar's number, and that'll be your first job. And so that was my first job. I got Puff the number.
There you have it. By any means necessary.
He could have sent you to get a Philly cheesesteak, but that was easy.
It's crazy you say the big story, because I don't know if you see the albums that we have in back of us, but
that was the first thing I saw. First thing I saw was that. It was one of my favorites of all time.
That's crazy. So you paid him, and he just didn't show, huh?
No. Well, what Puff did, he told them to give me my money back, and then for the next show, they gave me a discount on the next show, and I probably did maybe 3 or 4 Biggie shows after that in Philly.
So let's fast forward a little bit, because you have a extensive resume, so I want to make sure we cover everything. So how did you get involved in management? Because the story is pretty legendary. I guess you was down on your luck, and Lady Gaga comes out of the sky. So how does that story come as far as the management and finding Lady Gaga?
Well, Eve gave me my first shot at management, and so with Eve, she was I knew her from Philly, and I was helping her actually find a manager, because she was kind of looking for a new management situation. and she just gave me the opportunity to do it. And so I worked with Eve for about seven or 8 years, and then I sold the company that I built. I sold it to a company called Sanctuary out of London. And at that time, we were managing Beanie Siegel, Eve, Freeway, a bunch of acts. And we sold that business. I moved to California to work for the company that I sold it to. And it just wasn't a great experience. You know, after about 1.5 years in, I'm like, okay, this isn't the right fit. And that was my first experience of learning about sort of culture and how, like where money can't buy you certain things. And that was my first real check that I got. And but it didn't make me happy. And I always had this thing, as crazy as it sounds, it was unimaginable for me to even make $100,000 in my just because my goals was like, if I could make $1,000 a week, I'd be set. You know, that was my thing I had in my mind. And I remember writing down just all my goals as a kid. And like every year I would write new stuff. And I had this goal to make $1 million by the time I turned 30. And for Father's Day I think it was 30, when I was 31, for Father's Day, my wife and my mom gave me this gift, and I opened it up, and it was this scrapbook. And my mom had saved every single letter that I wrote to myself as a kid. And in that, I accomplished every single thing, almost everything that I wanted to do, from right literally is unimaginable. But what I noticed, I'm like, it didn't change my life in terms of happiness. So because working with artists made me happy, working on music made me happy, being part of the culture made me happy, and working for this company didn't. So I went and tried to buy the company back. They wouldn't sell it back. Company ended up their company ended up going bankrupt. I was able to get out of the deal. And when I started over, I put the money I made into the new company. I put the money I made into buying a house. I bought a couple cars. I did everything that I blew it pretty much. And then Eve had fired me right when I started the new company. So I had to start all over from scratch, essentially. And so around that time, a friend of mine, introduced me to a new artist that he was going to fly out to audition, and that artist was Lady Gaga.
Can we unpack that a little bit as far as the selling the company? All right, so you build up a management company.
This is Irving Wonder you're speaking of, right?
Yeah,
the company.
Irving Wonder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you build up the management company and all of the Philly artists. Freeway, you said Beanie Siegel. Too. Yeah, legends.
Yeah.
So you got a nice thing. Who's on the roster? Is Philly is Freeway?
Yeah.
Beanie,
Oskino and Spark. So all of the stuff that was at Rock.
The whole state property is on the bill.
State property.
Yeah, exactly. So we had the whole state property, essentially. We had Eve as well. We managed Khalees. Then we partnered with Tony Davis on Nelly, Flo and Tree. Yeah, so that was the roster.
Okay, so you got a nice thing. I got a lot of questions about management. My first question is, what is the percentage that managers get paid? Is like 5% of everything that they book for it, or is it higher than that? Like, how does that business model work? It's
usually somewhere between 10 to 20%, depending on the size of the artist. So if it's a developing artist that you're starting from scratch, usually it's 20%. If you're coming into a superstar's business, usually it's around 10%.
So you're at the height in the early 2000s. We're talking Nelly, the height of his career. You're talking about Eve, the height of her career. So those percentages changed because when you met Eve, was she just starting or had she put out an album already?
She was just starting.
Okay, so then she probably fits in that scale of that 20 range.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, yeah, I think Eve was 15, because I was just starting, and it's
Oh, okay.
I would have done that one for free, by the way, because she's given me an opportunity. But so that was 15.
So it's 15% roughly, and just on everything that you can get for them. So like endorsement deals, shows, whatever, anything that you're responsible for. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the manager kind of sits in the center of like, you think of it like a hub and spokes essentially. So the manager kind of sits in the center and manages the relationship with the record companies, the music publishers, concert promoters, brands that may pay for endorsements. And so basically you is a commission-based business. So you commission as the client makes money essentially. You know, the downside is that if the client doesn't make money, you don't make money. But what's good is that the incentives are aligned at the end of the day. So it's not like you're making money when the client doesn't make money.
So it's in your best interest to make sure that they're making money,
Right?
Because then you make money.
Yeah, or you don't have a job.
Right. Did you go into, when you created Irving Wonder, did you go into it saying we're going to build this to a point so that we can sell it? And when you did sell it, what was the type of valuation that you put on the company?
Yeah, I didn't do it for knowing that I could even build a company, to be honest with you. Like for me, it was the company was me managing Eve out of my living room, you know, so with no employees or anything like that or whatever. So it wasn't even an incorporation at that time. So it just was more of let me protect her. Let me just see what we could build together. And it was a legendary manager, Chris Lighty, who gave me some office space in New York, where he said, you know what, come up and learn from us, you know, if you want to as well. And so that's what I did. And I didn't even know. And even once we built a company and started managing more clients, honestly, I didn't even know you could sell a management company until Matthew Knowles, Beyonce's dad, approached me. And he had sold his company to Sanctuary, and he was building out their urban division. And he approached me about buying my company and me being his number two over there. And to be honest, I didn't know how to value the company. We didn't keep great records. We didn't, you know, they said we need to start doing due diligence. And this is pre-Google, really. So, you know, you didn't really have a way to even know what due diligence was. So it's like, and in hip hop back then, we would take cash. So because I didn't want to, if somebody was booking a show, I couldn't trust that the guy in Memphis was gonna not pay me when we showed up or whatever. So it's like, or, you know, we took cash and everything. So we didn't have a lot of great records. So they trusted us on a lot of stuff. We had to pull together a lot of stuff. And to Beyonce's dad's credit, Matthew Knowles, he basically helped us determine what evaluation was. And he honestly changed my life and my family's life in terms of being able to give me an opportunity and to be able to know what success looked like and what it felt like, and for a black man to make another black man a millionaire is a beautiful thing.
EYL University is the biggest online platform for education, but it's much, much more. It's actually a community. Our private Facebook group has over 8,000 members and 20 infinity groups. The students teach themselves just as much as the professors do. We have weekly webinars. We have over 100 past webinars. You get access to MG, the Mortgage Guy's Real Estate Blueprint. You get access to monthly financial planning calls with yours truly. You get access to our monthly group chat investment calls and much, much more. So, go to EYLUniversity.com right now and take advantage of our limited offer, blowout sale, 65% off of the annual membership. EYLUniversity.com right now.
That is true.
Okay, right.
A couple of questions about that. So, artists, are you signing, like a manager? Are they signed to like a year, 2 years, 4 years? Like, are they signed, or is it just like a handshake agreement, and as long as things go good, but if you're not happy, you just leave? Because I see people leave their managers all the time, and I wasn't sure if there was like contracts in place where you have to stay with this manager for a period of time.
Yeah, it depends. Even I worked together for, like I said, almost 8 years. We never had a contract, and it was just handshake. And I know a lot of people like. I don't think Latifah and Shaquem have a contract. They've been together for 30 something years. And, Will Smith and James, sort of same thing or whatever. And, there's a lot of acts that I know that, that are like that. And so where you just have that relationship. And then sometimes there are contracts, and those contracts can be as short as 1 or 2 years, or they could be, up to 6 or 7 years. So it just sort of depends on the relationship, but there's no real set rules to it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you sell the company, but you sit there, and I'm wondering the level of regret. Did that sit in with you, or was it, you know what, my family's life has changed now financially, or was there regret in selling it, knowing that this was my baby that I let go, and I don't like how this is going right now?
So I sold two management companies, and both times I had seller's remorse, and because people always talk about buyer's remorse, and I learned about seller's remorse, because where I'm an entrepreneur by nature, is something about me where I like to control my own destiny in terms of just what I do, the decisions that I make. Honestly, a lot of my personal identity is tied into me being an entrepreneur, and it felt like I had a boss, and that really messed with me, like just from a pride standpoint of, and I'm not saying anything's wrong with that at all, because I feel like it's everybody needs to do what they have to do to make a living. But for me, what it was that I worked really hard to build these companies. I put a lot of pride and love into the work that I do and into the clients that I represent. And for people to treat it like a number or a transaction after it's done, that really bothered me. And it's like, because what I realized was working with other companies, it was all about money with those other companies. I've never done anything purely for money, never. And like for that to me, it just didn't sit right with me.
How much did you sell it for?
The first company we sold for, I think four and a half, something like $4.5 million for the first company.
Well, that's interesting, because it's like, for me, that's a risky proposition for somebody to buy, because it's like you're dealing with artists and their careers could be over at any given moment. Mm-hmm. And if there's not even like a contract in place with these artists, I mean, you're just buying a relationship, but how do you value a relationship? Because that relationship could be over tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's real talk. And that's the credit that I give Matthew for being able to bet on us. And the other piece of it too is that they're buying, a lot of the companies who buy management companies are buying cash flow, and it's a good cash flow business. So the companies are essentially buying cash flow.
Yeah, and at that time, the artists that you had were smoking. So that helps, right? But when it starts to slow down, I guess, and this is like 2006 when you realize like, all right, this is not working, and E fires you, things are starting to turn real quick. I read somewhere that you might have been facing eviction. So this is what's going through your mindset at that point now?
Fear, fear, and being sort of partially paralyzed, temporarily. My world is falling apart, because I went through a real hot streak where nothing could go wrong, and then all of a sudden everything's going wrong, and it felt like a spiral, and it felt like where things were out of my control, and I was dealing with embarrassment, I was dealing with shame, dealing with depression. I a family now at this time. So, you could take certain risk when you're 22. It's like, but mid 30s and you got, at that time we have 4 kids, we have 5 now, but having 4 kids and tuitions and mortgages and car notes and employee responsibilities, it got really scary really quick. And, luckily, I was able to come back from it. But while I was in it, it was a very dark time.
Why did she fire you?
She, I think she just had other aspirations, and she and I, is funny because Eve's like my sister. It's funny. A friend of mine, Tuma Basa, who I work with at Spotify, literally just texted me like an hour ago, sending me an article because it's the 20th anniversary this week of Eve's, I think at the Let There Be Eve album. And it's crazy that it was 20 years ago.
That is crazy.
Yeah, crazy. It was 20 years ago. But, so she and I were incredibly close, but she didn't feel like I was focused enough at that particular time, which, maybe she was right. But in my mind, I felt like I could get it to the next level. But she felt like she needed to do other things. And she decided that, she wanted to explore other managers, which I didn't understand it at that time. It was like a divorce because, a heartbreak, because of the relationship. And I was mad as you would normally be mad under those circumstances. And especially while I was going through all of like the terrible stuff, like really mad, but I just would not let the anger consume me, man. And that was a big piece of it. It was a big piece of it.
So for the second run, when you get Lady Gaga and John Legend, what did you do different? Did you do anything different as far as the management style, or I'm pretty sure you were more respectful with money this time around? And how did that change? Like you had money, you lost it, but then you got an opportunity to get a rebirth. So what was different the second wave?
I think I was different. I think in a couple of different ways. It's like humility for sure, because it's like nothing wakes you up like cold concrete, and so it was a very humbling experience to say the least. And then the other piece of it was a friend of mine introduced me to meditation. And that's what really helped me get through that hard situation. And it was just exercise that I learned during meditation, where basically it's almost like you imagine yourself out of your own body, and you look back at all of your best experiences and your worst experiences. And what you realize in your best experiences, you really didn't have that much to do with it. So you could plan for certain things, but you never could plan for specifics. So there's no plan in my life that I'm going to meet Eve, that I'm going to meet Gaga, that I'm going to meet, CEOs, or, this is when grace comes into play, and this is when faith comes into play. And so what it taught me through that experience was although I tried to take credit for a lot of my own success, a lot of it is just grace too. And being prepared for it. So I got to have faith that I'm going to be met with grace again. And when you have that level of faith, it shows up for you time and time and time again, and you'll be tested on it. And to see, whether you run scared again, but it continuously shows up. And so that, so I think those were the two things when I did meet Gaga. I had no money. She really didn't have money. Vince, who introduced me to her, didn't have money. Jimmy Iovine at Interscope was going through his divorce. So Jimmy was going through a tough time. So I think you got 4 people all, sort of fighting for their lives and all going through tough stuff. So, you can't fall off the floor. So there's nowhere else to go but up. So we just hustled and did the work.
Yeah. So at this point, it's almost like the rebirth, right? You did it with Eve. You came up together. You're starting over. Now you're back in the clubs. You're booking gigs, and I'm trying to fix. So we got Vince involved, who introduced you. You got Jimmy Iovine. Akon ends up signing her. Do you bring her to Akon? How does that work?
No, Jimmy Iovine brought in Akon to as an executive producer, because Akon was fire, and he had a producer named Red One that was signed to him, and Red One did Bad Romance, Just Dance, Poker Face, ton of our big records. So bringing Khan on board just was, that was a blessing as well.
So how quickly does that ramp up with Lady Gaga before it becomes like, who she is like now?
Probably, from the time we put out her first single to the time it really broke was a little over a year, I want to say. It was a grind, at those moments where you just felt like nothing was happening. I felt like I knew the music was great and I felt like she was a superstar, but when nobody was responding, it's like you're questioning yourself, like, okay, is this not as good as we think it is? No, it is. Let's, so we just kept at it until, finally, we got one radio station and I think it was Toronto to play the record. Then we got Buffalo to play it. Then, you sort of saw the dominoes start falling.
So your job as a manager was more than just finding opportunities. It's actually helping to push them. What are you doing as a manager? Is everything that needs to be done, utility, like anything that needs to be done, pretty much reaching out to radio stations? Is that the job of a manager or no?
You do it. The job of a great manager is to do whatever needs to be done to ensure the long-term sustainable success of your artists. And for me, that could mean carrying bags on the road sometimes. That could be helping to set up gear in a club, or that could be negotiating with the CEO of Pepsi. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And that could be all within the same week, by the way. So it's like you do whatever you need to do. And but it's just you set. I always felt like I gotta set the tone for the level of work ethic so that everybody else can follow.
So at this point, you're a talent manager, but you're also building too, right? Because now you're building the Atom Factory, if I'm not mistaken, right? That's now it's not just music; it's film, it's television. Is this happening at the same time?
No, so Gaga I was managing out of my living room as well.
So that's a prestigious living room.
Different living room. But needless to say, it was a living room, and it wasn't a company, and it was managing her. And then as she started to grow a little bit more, I needed to hire somebody to oversee like ticketing for me to make sure that people got into the clubs. And then I had to hire a road manager because I was getting too many emails and phone calls to stay out on the road. And so I had to put somebody on the road. So that ended up turning into, after a couple of 2-3 years, 30 people, and then, other clients and other verticals. It probably took 6 years to get into other verticals. Like the investing and things along those lines, but it sort of started. Everything it always starts with this little seed, and then you see that seed germinate. And what I tell founders that I work with, and or entrepreneurs that I coach, like Facebook was built with one line. It was starting that line of code, so it wasn't newsfeed and ad sales and Instagram and WhatsApp. Mark had to write a line of code. And so what's that first step that you can take? And then that second step that you could take and sort of, build it brick by brick. And that's the way I know how to build businesses.
So let's talk about investing. How did you get into investing? Especially are you an angel investor? Like AF Square Investments? What exactly is that?
Yeah, so The AF Square stands for Atom Factory Angel Fund, and we just call it the AF Square. But for AF Square, that actually started from just me getting the opportunity to invest in a startup. And I didn't really know about startups at that time. A friend of mine introduced me to a guy who had invested in the music industry. And this guy was like a pretty big tech investor. And he asked me for my advice on the music industry. And I said, okay, if I help you get out of the music industry, will you help me get into tech? Because he had invested in some bullshit record label. And I'm like, you got to get your money out of this. And he introduced me to a bunch of people in tech. And that sort of led to me starting to have a little money, and not a lot, by the way. So I wasn't investing like millions of dollars. I started off with investing thousands of dollars and putting it here. And it just was some surplus money that I didn't want to blow, because last time I blew my money. So I'm like, okay, at least I can, invest and learn right now. So worst case scenario, if these investments go to zero, I built some great relationships and learned a lot, but nothing that was going to keep me up at night, in terms of the size of the investments.
So, okay. So, and that's how you got into the Ubers and the Lyfts, and just a domino effect from there.
Yeah. So Uber was, they were only in San Francisco at that time, and they had just started doing like black cars. And a friend of mine called me up and said, I want you to meet the CEO of Uber. And I never forget, I was driving down Santa Monica in LA, and I'm on the phone with him, and he's telling me about the business. And I'm like, how in the world are y'all going to afford to buy, thousands of these cars? Because I'm thinking they were going to have to buy, individual cars. And as he was explaining what they were going after, just made sense. I ended up investing that same week, I want to say. And then when I invested in Lyft, they weren't even called Lyft. They were called Zimride. And they were a company that took kids from like college campuses to dorms. And so like carpooling. And they later became Lyft, but at that time, they were a small, I think a $16 million valuation, somewhere around there.
So long way from now.
So you still have the stock? Did you keep that ownership all the way to when they became public, and now you have stock?
Right up. Both companies right up to IPO.
One of the other companies you invested in was Spotify, and I know you were at Spotify as the head of creative services. Number one, what does that job entail? And are you still invested with them? I know they have you as an advisor now. How does that work?
Yeah, Spotify. I met Daniel years ago, but I invested right before. But it was before they launched America, and became very close with Daniel, the founder, and he and I would just talk all the time. Really, because his thing was, Daniel's a guy that can see 10 years ahead, and those are the kind of founders you want to invest in, by the way, because it's like certain people in the record business they live quarter to quarter, and they think about what's happening right now, and they make decisions based on what's happening right now. And most of the people who at record labels, they don't own those record labels, they work there. So their incentives aren't 10 years down the line, because they might not be there. So when you got somebody like Daniel, who was in his 20s, and he's looking at building this company that, he'll be at through his 40s, 50s, probably, he's looking at what the future is. And his frustration was the music industry wasn't moving fast enough. And you had a lot of people who weren't putting their music on streaming. You had a lot of people who were pissed off because they're like, we make money off of CDs and downloads. How dare these people try to give us fractions of a cent for streaming? And what they didn't understand at that particular time was streaming is the best thing that ever happened to music, because you get paid every time people listen to it now. So it's not like back in the day where that Biggie record you got in behind you, I listened to that so many times, but Big only got paid that one time I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming changed everything. It becomes this annuity. And I came on board as somebody to help translate that to the music industry and educate the music industry on why this new technology was going to be transformative to the way we do business. And I also had to translate internally at Spotify is like, how do we build a team within Spotify that understands the goals and motivations of musicians and the business around them that support those musicians. So I kind of served as a translator between those two worlds.
How much resistance did you face from artists? I know I hear a lot of times when they talk about the percentages that they get off of a stream in the early stages. You know, I could imagine they're looking at my money stream is now changed. What kind of resistance did you meet?
So no exaggeration. My first week at Spotify, I went to do a presentation. I told the team to pull together some numbers, and our first meeting, we were doing a meeting with Maverick Entertainment, which is like Sal, who manages The Weeknd, and French Montana, and G. Roberson, who manages everybody in the world.
Yeah, everyone.
So like it's their whole staff meet, and Guy Osiri, who manages Madonna, U2, all of them. So I go to their staff meeting, and I pull up a presentation to show them how much Spotify paid out to all of their artists on streaming that year for the last X amount of years, and then how much they're going to make over the next 5 years as well. And everybody's jaws dropped because they're like, where's that money? And I said, because you can't blame, because I did this presentation for a ton of different managers, but what I was showing them was we pay out a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Like one artist on the platform, it was 1 year this artist grossed, I don't know what the artist got, but but I know we paid out close to $100 million. So I'm like, and that's not Apple Music, that's not all the streaming combined. That's just
Spotify.
So any sort of gripes should be with the record labels and the deal structures that the record labels have with the artists versus what Spotify paid out to artists. And so that was part of the education process. And that's how we ended up getting a lot of artists onto the platform, because they started seeing the importance of it. And then also we shared a lot of data. I'm showing you how to reach your fans. We're showing you where your fans are, how they engage with your music. And then for the older legacy artists, you know, part of the conversation was I showed a lot of the artists, because Beatles wouldn't put their music on the platform at one point. And what we did, once we got the Beatles onto the platform, we showed them, and you know, in the estates, I think it was 85% of, or some big percentage of people who were streaming the Beatles were under the age of 30. So these are people who weren't born. So you got new fans now. So if you're a legacy act and you're thinking about generations, and you're thinking about how do you leave your legacy, you have to be on streaming if you want to reach younger consumers. So that was sort of, you know, just the education process we helped put together.
Going on, y'all. Goat Fuel has completely revolutionized the energy drink market. It's formulated with clean, natural ingredients, and is the only energy drink to use cordyceps mushrooms. Cordyceps help your body use oxygen more efficiently and have been used in Chinese medicine for thousands of years. Not only that, it's been known to help boost the immune system and reduce inflammation. So if you're looking for an energy drink that matches your style and represents your hustle, drink Goat Fuel. It only makes sense. Click the link below and use our promo code EYL20 to get 20% off. From one goat to the next. Cheers, family.
So a couple different things with that. So the record labels wasn't being transparent in the money that they were receiving, and they were kind of like keeping the money. That's what I'm assuming from the conversation, and not informing the artist, and I guess kind of just making up reasons why they wasn't getting paid, as far as like we had to spend this money on marketing and billboards and stuff like that.
But to be clear, they weren't stealing the money. It's the way the deal structures are work with record labels and artists. So the money was coming in, but if you only get a 16% royalty, and that means 84% of that money goes to the record label. And then out of that 16% royalty, you're paying producers, you're paying mixers, you know, all of your advances have to get recouped, and any money that they might have lost on you in the past, they got to recoup that back as well. So so the way that the deals aren't structured in a way where the artists are receiving windfalls. And especially the other last little piece, those deals were justified back in the day when you had factories, trucks, plastic CDs, printing press, you know, thousands of employees who had to, you know, get these things around the world. All you got to do is send me a file at midnight before the album comes out. You know what I'm saying?
They're still factoring those costs when in this day and age, those costs don't exist.
They don't exist. They don't exist. They don't.
So we interviewed Styles P, a legend, and he said that
years. That's my man. I love Styles.
Okay, he said you know, he's been in the game for what, 25 years, something like that, and he said that he can't tell you how streaming works. And he said that he would assume that most record label executives can't explain how streaming works. Can you explain how streaming works? Like, as far as like, is it possible to give a 5th grade education on like, okay, if you stream this, you get 1 penny,
songs equals
1,000 songs equals $1.
Like
is that possible, or is it too complicated?
I guess the simple way to put it is there's a pool of cash that record labels participate in from subscriptions and advertising revenue. And it's not really, so Spotify doesn't actually pay per play. It's not as simple as getting paid every time it's played. Record labels are paid out of that pool based off of market share, and then they divide that, and then they pay their artists based off of the pool that they receive. So Universal might have 37% market share. Sony might have 25% market share. And let's say Warner has 15% market share, and then Merlin, that represents a bunch of independents, have the remaining market share or so. They then break that pot up, and then they distribute the revenue based off of their artists' royalty structures and the amount of streams that their artists received.
Okay. So what royalty percentage would be like ideal in this day and age, right? So you said like the 60% when there was all those other costs. What should an artist go into to make sure it's a respectable deal as far as royalty percentage?
It depends on how much leverage you have. And, you know, the less leverage you have, the worse the deal is going to be. The more money you take, the worse the deal is going to be. So it's kind of figuring out what type of leverage you want to go in with. So like a lot of artists that record companies are signing nowadays are going in with a lot more leverage, so they're getting better deal terms because record companies don't want to take risk anymore. They want to sign what's hot. So if you're going in hot, then you're negotiating ownership of your masters. You negotiate and, you know, a 50-50 joint venture deal. And some of the smarter artists are going in and negotiate and saying, you know what, I don't really need that much of your money, but I want you to help me with international, and I want you to help me on some marketing. So I'm just going to give you a 15-20% distribution fee, and that'll be what you take, and then I'm taking the rest essentially.
When did you leave Spotify?
Maybe about two and a half years ago. But yeah, almost 3 years ago now.
So were you there when they started to make a strong push in the podcast?
Yeah. Yep.
Were you involved with that at all, or?
Lightly. Courtney Holt, who's a brilliant guy. Courtney ran podcasts for Spotify. So Courtney and I worked together when he was at Interscope, and then he went to run a division at MTV and then Maker Studios. And then he and I went into Spotify around the same time. But I was an investor in Gimlet Media, and so part of just the Gimlet conversation and working closely with those guys.
Spotify ended up buying Gimlet, correct?
Yes, Spotify bought Gimlet.
I have a couple questions about art, but before that, FazeClan, I want to talk about that a little bit, because when I saw that, it's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily assume that they needed angel investing or venture capital investing, because they're a gaming crew. But so how did that work? Like, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, my son Troy Jr. Sent me he said, Dad, I'm going to work for this company. I want you to check them out to see, if you like them. Cause he basically was helping them figure out some of the music initiatives that they were working on. And he plays games. He's sort of perfect kid that lives between gaming and music. And he sent me some information, their deck. And I'm like, okay, this sounds really interesting. I said, and I know the CEO. He used to manage Kid Rock. I said, tell Lee Trink to call me. And so when Lee called me and he told me his vision, I ended up making the investment from there. And then my youngest son, Mike, he's a big time gamer. And because I went home and I asked Mike about it, and he knew everything about FazeClan. And what I figured out from my conversation with him was, I said, okay, I get it. FazeClan gets culture, because they felt like Wu-Tang Clan to me. Like when I looked at like ASAP Crew and I looked at Wu-Tang, I'm like, FazeClan nailed that. The cultural piece of being able to build out a crew, and then like people are picking their favorite members of the crew. They're doing merch. FazeClan's doing merch drops, that are selling out $1 million and like this. So I understood right away what they were doing culturally. Gaming wise, I'm not a gamer. I don't know. I understand it a lot, just from what I learned over the last few years. But I'm not a part of the culture, but I understood what they were doing culturally.
That's kind of like
I'm a retired gamer.
Yeah, it's interesting because I see parallels as far as like what we do. So like the financial literacy movement is like, you're on Clubhouse, like that's all you see on Clubhouse is everybody's talking about this financial literacy, like Bitcoin or NFTs. I want to ask you about that, but real estate, stuff like that. So it's like for Earn Your Leisure, I feel like it's become a cultural phenomenon, and it's building.
I love it because we never talked about money as a culture. Like we talked about aspiration, about, what we wanted to buy, but we never talked about money as a culture. And I think that's the reason why a lot of first generation people go broke, who come from our culture, because we don't have the lessons and networks and cheat codes in terms of understanding how does banking work? How does interest rates work? How does investments work? How do ETFs work? Like those aren't culture. Those aren't conversations that we have amongst each other. And what I noticed, like, I started having some conversations, man, with. This is the beauty of the one good thing I could say that came out of the Trump era was it scared us so bad what was happening in the country in terms of anti-Black and seeing these white nationalists, walk through these college campuses with tiki torches and polo collars. And that a lot of Black people who were competitive in our business started really pulling together and talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And I've had some conversations, man, where I'm like, I've learned so much from Jay-Z, from Puff, from Big John, from like Jay Brown, these are the types of conversations that we should have been having 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But, you know what I'm saying? But but we were taught coming up that it was like almost felt like zero sum. And it was like this competitive thing. It's still good to be competitive, but it's not zero sum anymore. It's we're going to compete and then learn from each other. We're going to compete, then learn from each other. Nothing was better when Jay Brown and it was 20 managers competing to sign Shakira, and everybody flew to Barcelona within 2 days. So when we get off the plane, I get off the plane, and as the guys holding up the signs with every manager's name in the fucking industry that I know. And it's like, oh my God, I thought I was the only person here. But it boiled down to me and Jay Brown. Jay Brown beat me. But I'd rather see it go to Jay.
Yeah.
But there's other stuff that I beat Rock Nation on, that they would rather see it come to me. They put me in the Stance apparel deal, Stance socks and Stance apparel. They put me in Stance. I put them in Uber. They put me in a bunch of different deals. I put them in a bunch of different deals. That's our network. That's what we do for each other. And that's but then even down to conversations of mental wellness around this. Mm-hmm. How do you manage your family around this? Because the financial success is one thing, but how do you manage your headspace as you're dealing with this? Because people, my cousin said to me, this is what it's and we're one of my close cousins who we've been through like a life together. He was laughing at me one day because I think I was having a argument with my wife about something, and he said, "You still got these problems with all this money?" That was his comment. I said, "You think things go away? You think
he didn't listen to Big? More money, more problems."
Yo, it's different. You know what I'm saying? Like, the difference is like you become a bigger target. But I still deal with the same problems with like my kids that other people deal with their kids. I probably still have some of the same conversations with my wife that other people might have with their wife. I still have the same conversations with a doctor that other people will have with their doctor. Like, so you're still a human being. But as a lot of times as Black men in these situations, you feel isolated and alone as you're navigating it, because if I can't call some of my friends in Philly and complain about certain things when they might be dealing with a mortgage issue or whatever else, like it's certain things that I might want to that might be a real problem to me, that they might look at me like I'm crazy for talking to them about. But nevertheless, it's still a problem. So I got to talk to somebody about it. So it's good to be able to talk to people who are living it at the same exact time, that can help, or might have lived it right before you, that can help you get through it.
That is a fact. art.
And
Can we
shame
talk
gets
about
in the way of that. Not to cut you off, but I think it's important because embarrassment and shame will hold us back from sharing that with other brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's something like you said, it's important to speak about because no matter what level of life that you're on, you have to have peers. And then sometimes you don't have the peers or your peers won't communicate if they feel like, they don't want to, let people in on their business or they, and it's like, unfortunately, as Black people, the majority of people are not at an economic level where they're peers with millionaires or multimillionaires. Like, majority of people are not peers with that. So, like Nas said, my tax bracket, not enough Blacks have it.
Yeah.
It's just reality.
Yeah. I think I heard you say it earlier. The cultural conversation is changing. I like that because it is like what you were talking about with Jay Brown and talking about with Big John. Those things were happening at that level, but I feel like that group of guys that we looked up to, the Jays and the Puffs, they showed us indirectly, but I felt like nobody told us, like gave us the blueprint. We could watch the blueprint, but I feel like now the cultural conversation is changing where the blueprint is actually there for you. Now it's just about applying.
About Clubhouse. That was one of the things I loved about Clubhouse. Like where, I think is, like with any platform, by the way, you're gonna have posers and bad information and specialists who aren't specialists, but there's a lot of good information on there, man. Like, and a lot of conversations that, in even a conversation that we were referencing earlier, with Meek and Swiss and Trap and a few other people or whatever, that conversation to me was like, I talked offline, like, cause I got a group text with probably 15 people who are usually on Clubhouse. And it's such a beautiful thing, man, for when people to have a question, to be able to have a place to go, to ask it without being embarrassed. And for people to be able, because like you said, because it's not just this, I don't have as much money as Jay-Z, or Puff. Hopefully I'll get there, but just the reality is, it's like they're billionaires. They're legit billionaires now. But I still feel like I can have a conversation with them and ask them questions and learn from them. You know what I'm saying? And same way, it could be somebody who might only have, I talked to some of my friends who might have a few $1,000s left over that they could play with, that they're like, what should I do? And a couple of those friends I put in deals with me. I'm like, you know what? Put that little bit of money, put that in Triller, put that in this place, put that in this place. Because it's access a lot of times. So it's not just about the amount, it's just about access sometimes.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
Can we talk about art? I want to talk about art. Because we haven't really spoke about art at all. So art is interesting. This is the question I asked you on Clubhouse. I was saying, like, because we're heavy in stocks. So when you buy stock, you buy Apple at $120, it goes to $240. You doubled your money, right? Like, you kind of know Apple's a good company. You can look at the bottom line. You can look at the revenue. You can look at, new releases, product lines, and you make an educated decision that this is a company that will probably go up in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like art is just really subjective, though. It's like one person could look at a painting and say that that's terrible. Another person can say that that's the best painting in the world. And they both could be right? It's like, it's all subjective. So how do you value art? How is art valued? It seems like it's extremely complicated to know if something's going to be good or not. Like, how do you look at something and say, this is a good investment to invest in?
By the way, stocks are very subjective too, because when you look at price to earnings ratio on some companies, or You look it could be very subjective.
40x, 30x.
Yeah,
That's true.
It could be very subjective, and I think a lot more information is there when you're a publicly traded company in terms of the transparency. But one analyst may say this stock is terrible. Another analyst might say this stock is wonderful. And that's why you got short sellers, and you got people who are taking big bets. So I think it's some similarities there for sure. With art, it's a lot like stock in terms of information, because information is everything. And art's not as complicated as people think when it's just access to the information is what's closed a lot of times. So the way it works is that, say for instance, it's funny, I could turn around right here. I got a couple, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a few paintings right there. So
okay, I see it. Yeah.
So those that's a brand new artist. Austin Azor is the artist name, who I think his work is fantastic, really great work, brand new artist. The dealer that I bought it from is an incredibly talented dealer who really is great and has a great track record for discovering young artists who end up becoming, successful artists. And so a lot of it is I like the work, but just because I like work doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to invest money into the work. And because especially when it's expensive, his work in particular wasn't that expensive. But I got friends who they say, okay, I got $25,000. I'm gonna buy that painting. What I'll tell them is, okay, if you got $25,000 to spend on a painting, I'm gonna send you over 30 artists within that price range who have great work and who have a great trajectory in terms of what their career looks like. Because the $25,000 that you're getting ready to spend, you can spend it if you like that artist, that's great, but it's probably never going to be a resale value on that. And in fact, you may not be able to ever sell it again, but because it's very expensive for artists that no one's ever heard of before. And so you got market makers who from collectors, museums, certain galleries, certain curators, certain art critics who can make or break artists essentially. So within that network, they're basically saying, these are the next generation of artists that we feel is gonna sort of graduate to certain levels.
So it's like music where you have gatekeepers that's pretty much stamping something like this Bobby Shmurda song is the song that radio should play. We believe in it. We're going to push it. That's a little discouraging though, because it's like artists.
So the only difference in it though, right, is where the consumer and music sort of have the last choice. Like, and the gatekeepers and the music business can only get it but so far. But then the end of it, the consumer has to buy it. Mm-hmm. And the art market specifically is different in the sense of as a collector that has influence, you also can influence price and interest. So if Swiss says goes on Instagram and says he's collecting an artist, that artist, a lot of people are going to pay attention to that artist. If Thelma Golden, who runs Studio Museum in Harlem, goes on Instagram and says she likes an artist, it's lights out for that artist at that point. If Gagosian Gallery says they're signing an artist, their prices on that artist prices just double automatically. And so as a collector who has a bit of influence, I want to make sure that prices don't go below what I paid. So I'm going to make sure that if that artist's work comes up for auction, you want to make sure that price goes more at the end of the day, because now all of the work in your collection from that artist just went up.
Yeah, but even in that space, right, to get into a museum or to get in some of these galleries, I feel like sometimes the artist has to raise the price, obviously, because if they're in there, there's going to be the commission fee. And that's kind of like, I think what the premise of what Swiss did was having no commission, right? The 100% of the money goes 100% to the artist. So, I mean, is it kind of double-edged sword where it's like I have to do that in order to be in there?
No, so you really, is levels, right? You don't want to ever go in, you don't want to, your sole goal, you want to be in great collections. You want to be with people who aren't going to flip your work to auctions. You want to be with people who are going to lend your work to museums. You want to be in museum collections. So, and in order to do that, you don't want to overprice your work. So you want to be at a reasonable price where good collectors don't feel like what I just told you, that story about why would I buy this for that when I could get this for that? So it's like, so you want to go in with a good entry level. Once you get to a certain point and you're in those collections, then most people end up going with a gallery that could sort of take them to the next level and get them into even better collections or more more global collections or more diverse collections, at that point. And the value and the work ends up getting pushed up at that point. And so there is some prestige that comes along with being with a Gagosian gallery or Zwerner or Hauser and Wirth or one of those big galleries like that too, who are going to push.
So for me personally, let's say, I'm in stocks, real estate, and I'm looking to diversify my portfolio, and I want to start investing in art. Say I have a budget around like you said, $25,000. $25,000 I want to invest in art. What steps should I like? What do I do?
So me personally, I don't invest in art. That's a big thing for me. So I'm a collector, and that's the difference, because it's like, being somebody that collects, I hold long term. So it's like, so I'm not buying the work to sell the work. I like the fact that it grows in value, by the way.
Maybe not like I want to trade it, but I just want to hold something, like buy and hold. Like I want to hold the stock like for 20, 30 years.
I bought that artwork for $1 million.
I just, I just want to buy some art that's going to appreciate. What should I do?
If I'm buying art to appreciate, I'm looking at young artists, if my budget's $25,000, I'm probably looking at artists in the $2,000 to $5,000 range, and those are the artists that I'm collecting. I'm looking at curators who are in with incredibly young artists, at the very beginning, because young artists will, when you're there in the beginning, when they're selling $5,000 paintings, and you're the person that's buying those $5,000 paintings, when their works are $50,000 to $250,000, those are collectors those are artists who are definitely going to be looking out for you in the future for the most part. When you can find people who are loyal like that, because they appreciate it when they're trying to keep their lights on. And there are artists that I bought their pieces at $5,000 in LA at a little gallery, and now it's like their pieces are crazy right now. Like I couldn't even buy their pieces on primary market now. I'm like, I don't even feel right. I'm like, hold on, this is where they're at right now. But it's like, those are people who appreciate it. But it's guys like Larry Osei Mensah is a curator out of the Bronx who has an incredible eye. He's there super early. And Larry puts me on to some artists when it's like, before they even have a gallery, you're buying work from the studio. And what I've been doing is putting all my friends who are taking collecting seriously, who want to collect. We got some guys who building some great collections who just never collected art before, but they're like, you know what? They're having fun with it. They're buying young artists at great prices, and they're watching those artists appreciate now.
That's dope.
How you feel about NFTs?
I think right now it's like super interesting because it's like is way overhyped, but it's absolutely here to stay in terms of how we think about collectibles. And it's funny, I did a call earlier today with the Prince Estate, and we were talking about, you know, just NFTs. And I said, you know what? I said, really, the way to think about it is another merch category for us. And so just look at it as simply just as another category. But I think for artists, it's going to be great in terms of being able to track your works, thinking about authenticity of works, to thinking about how about royalties and sort of making sure that you still participate financially along the way. But I love what's going on. I love that it's educating people on the space. That's the part I like about it the most. But I just hope people don't get stuck with a lot of bad goods that won't actually increase in value.
I'm glad you brought up the Prince Estate because it's something I definitely wanted to talk to you about. Obviously, you're the entertainment advisor. You said that this is one of the things, NFT is one of the things you're looking into. But what are you doing in that role? Are you the one that is making sure that the music and the catalogs are being distributed and licensed properly? And how did you come into the role?
Yeah, I got a call it'll be 4 years ago this month, actually, from one of the attorneys who worked with the estate at that time, and they were making a change from the previous people who oversaw the estate, and asked would I be interested in speaking to Comerica. The Comerica Bank were just started overseeing the estate, and would I be interested in working with them as an advisor on the entertainment assets? And of course, the answer is like, put me on what time's the flight? And you know, I flew to Minneapolis, did a presentation, and ended up started working with them about 4 years ago. But it's been amazing. So my job is just to figure out, you know, what's the long-term strategy around the entertainment assets. So from documentaries to, you know, music releases to partnerships, music licensing, and you know, at some point being able to turn over a clean, organized, beautiful asset over to his family members.
Powerful. So I'm thinking 4 years ago, that's around the time that Jay put out the song on 444 when he was talking about the estate. So were you a part of that deal when the music got licensed to Tidal?
I was part of the deal and helping to mend the Tidal estate relationship. I'm like, we can't have fights in the family, you know.
No one wins when the family feuds.
No one wins when the family feuds. That is a fact. That is a fact. Well, Mr. Carter, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. What would you like to tell the people? Any initiatives or anything you would like to let the public be aware of?
No, look, I just love what you guys are doing, and we'll continue to support. And let's just keep, just the financial literacy out there for the culture, for our people, and continue to push each other to the next level. But love what you guys are doing.
Appreciate it. Troy, housekeeping items?
Yeah, shout out to everybody on patreon.com. That is our Proud to Pay program. Obviously, Tier 5 members, you have access to the #1 school for financial literacy. That's EYL University. #1 in everything as far as business, entrepreneurism, and pretty much anything you want as far as careers in the world. So shout out to all the earners that are part of that and everybody that is supporting our merch on EYL.com, earnyourleisure.com. We appreciate you for all your patience and all your diligence in this time of getting the merch out to you. So thank you for all your support.
Yes, thank you guys for rocking with us. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
My graduates from my school being Forbes. Bag drop.
Bag drop.
A mic drop. Bag drop.
Bag drop.